This is part 6, and I'm reading a pack of 36 trading cards filled with great information and all the names and dates you can look up, guys. This is all true. So, let me see. We are on card number 27. Let's continue. Card number 27, Operation Snowcap. I love the artwork. On the back, the title is Andean Fiasco. Let's read. On August 20th, 1990, the House Committee on Government Operations released a report on the success of Operation Snowcap, the Reagan-Bush administration program aimed at stopping the flow of drugs into the U.S. at their source. Riddled with corruption and contradiction, Operation Snowcap, the House concluded, was a joke. Snowcap's goal had been to eliminate coca crops, cocaine processing laboratories, clandestine landing strips, and other trafficking operations in the coca-producing countries of South America. But the committee learned that less than 1% of the region's cocaine had been destroyed by this campaign. DEA agent Michael Levine asserted that his attempt to infiltrate top-level Bolivian drug cartels were sabotaged by his superior's insistence on an immediate low-level bust, which blew his cover. The 1990 report found that in Bolivia, Peru, and Colombia, authorities are deeply involved in narcotics trafficking. For example, when a DEA team tried to visit a processing site in Peru, local police had opened up and fired at their helicopter. Operation Snowcap was simply following the formula of previous drug wars launched in Mexico, Guatemala, Bolivia, and Argentina. In each of these countries, the military used U.S. drug war money to reinforce ongoing dirty war campaigns launched against local left-wing movements. Perhaps this was the covert intent of such U.S. drug policies. While the military grew more repressive, the major drug growers had grown wealthier. After 3.5 years of Operation Snowcap, the only significant drug traffickers who had been caught and put out of business were those in direct competition with the major cartels. There you go. So you guys can Google Operation Snowcap. Some artwork there. That was card number 27. Card number 27. All right, let's read card number 28. Operation Just Because. On the back, it says the invasion of Panama. Let's read. Shortly after midnight on December 20th, 1989, U.S. forces, for the 12th time since 1903, invaded Panama. Their mission was to depose longtime CIA asset General Manuel Noriega, an indicted drug trafficker. The 24,000-man invasion force included 4,500 paratroopers, making this the largest airborne assault since World War II. A local seismograph recorded 90 explosions in the first 10 minutes and 417 within 14 hours. Superior technology and firepower quickly crushed all resistance. Defense Secretary Richard Cheney called the attack, quote, the most surgical operation of its size ever carried out, end quote. But the official death toll of 500 to 600 badly understates the reality. A recently uncovered Army memo reads, quote, payment of individual combat-related claims, as in Grenada, would not be in the best interests of the Department of Defense because of the potentially huge numbers of such claims, end quote. Another Army document states that, quote, about 10 blocks of high-density housing or slums were destroyed, end quote. Panamanian Defense Forces headquarters adjoined this district known as El Chorillo, and 25% people, 80% of them black, lived there, most of them asleep when the invasion began. Independent human rights groups put the death toll between 3,000 and 5,000, with another 25,000 homeless. To cover up the carnage, the Army excluded the press and Red Cross from heavily bombed areas for 3 days, during which time they seized hospitals, sealed the morgues, and committed on-site incinerations and burials in common graves without notifying the families of the dead. Diggings at 11 such mass graves goes on, despite the lack of help from the U.S. Army or Panamanian officials. Damn. You can Google Operation Just Because. Guy's in bed with a notorious drug trafficker, Manuel Noriega. CIA assets all the time, guys. Bin Laden, freaking Saddam Hussein, all CIA assets. And when they weren't useful, you know what happens. Okay, so 3 more cards to go. This is titled Thurman's Panty Raid. I wonder what this is about. Card number 29. Oh, it's about General Manuel Noriega, the title on the back. While searching for fugitive General Manuel Noriega, U.S. Southern Command Chief General Max Thurman reported that Noriega's beach house contained 50 kilos of cocaine and evidence that he and his brujas were practicing Brazilian witchcraft on enemies like Ronald Reagan and Henry Kissinger. Noriega, rumored to be wearing red underwear to ward off the evil eye, eventually took refuge in the Vatican embassy and later turned himself into U.S. authorities to face prosecution on a 1988 U.S. drug trafficking indictment. The U.S. Army later admitted that the beach house cocaine was really tamale flour. As Noriega awaits trial, his case is being hampered by the government's refusal to unfreeze $20 million in foreign banks, which he needs to pay his defense attorneys. In addition, authorities have violated his civil rights by taping phone calls between him and his lawyers. Should Noriega's case ever come to trial, the true extent of his role as a middleman between the U.S.-backed Contras and the Medellin cocaine cartel, undertaken as a favor for his longtime CIA benefactors, could prove embarrassing to George Bush, whose role in the Contra supply op has so far been cloaked in secrecy. The invasion left the Panamanian economy in shambles. Damage is estimated at $1.5 to $3 billion, and though the U.S. promised $420 million in aid, only 1/4 of that had been delivered by the end of 1990. Nor has removing Noriega made a dent in Panama's drug trade. Illegal drug shipments through Panama are more abundant than ever, and President Indara is so far unwilling to weaken his country's bank secrecy laws. So there you go. 2 more cards to go, guys. Card number 30, Narco Dollars. Let's read this one right here, guys. The back's titled Silent Partners. Got a story on the back there. Let's read. Ex-Democratic Senator William Proxmire, who chaired 1980 hearings on money laundering, found that many banks are addicted to drug money, just as millions of Americans are addicted to drugs, he quotes. Collusion between drug traffickers and their silent partners, the bankers, is natural. Traffickers need banks to deposit cash, transfer funds, and reinvest profits. Banks need cash to maintain legal reserves for outstanding loans. At $150 billion a year, drugs are the 3rd largest industry in the U.S., after food and electronics, and all the profits go untaxed. The Bank Secrecy Act of 1970 requires all banks to identify the depositor and the source of cash deposits over $10,000, but many banks ignore the law or file reports too late for the government to take action. This is true not just of small Latin-owned banks in Florida, but of major banks as well. In 1985, the Bank of Boston was fined a paltry $500,000 for failing to report 1,163 illegal transactions worth $1.2 billion, and Crocker Bank was fined $1.5 million for failing to report 2 transfers of hot money from Hong Kong, worth $3.43 billion. Others fined include Bank of America and Chase Manhattan. Mobsters can also bypass the law by making multiple deposits, each too small to alert federal authorities. Local Federal Reserve branches show billions of dollars in unaccounted for surpluses every year. Panama is the largest laundry for the cocaine profits. President Guillermo Endara and Vice President Billy Ford are part owners of banks that have washed millions for Colombia drug lords. Other Panamanians with cocaine ties include the Ministers of Treasury and Labor, the Supreme Court Chief Justice, the Attorney General, and the Ambassador to Washington. That was narco dollars, guys. Wow. So yeah, guys, don't forget about the banks, man. That's just liquid cash, untaxed, man. No wonder I always think about, like, you know, the senators, the cartels, but then think about the banks, man. Guys are corrupt too, so. All right, card number 31, last card for today, guys. Urban myth. Who uses drugs? On the back title. Contrary to the popular notion that drug users are mainly black ghetto dwellers, the ex-drug czar William Bennett recently noted that the typical cocaine user is white, male, a high school graduate, employed full-time, and living in a small metropolitan area or suburb. A 1988 to 89 survey of 350,000 junior high and high school kids found that 7% of white students use cocaine, compared with 4% of black students. Whites were also bigger users of marijuana, 24% to 13%, and alcohol, 57% versus 29%. In all age groups, higher percentages of whites use drugs than blacks. But it is blacks and minorities who are featured in media coverage of the problem and who continue to fill the courts and jails. A 1990 study found that from 1985 to 88, drug persecutions of white youth dropped 50%, while for non-whites they jumped 88%. 1 in 4 black men under 30 are in prison, on parole, or on probation, over half of them on drug-related offenses. For whites, the figure is 1 in 17. As black columnist Clarence Page explains, quote, a well-off user who makes his or her deals in downtown office buildings or in a quiet suburb is more difficult to catch and more expensive to prosecute than a street corner crack dealer in an inner city neighborhood. Blacks and Hispanics are disproportionately stopped, searched, and swept on sight. Instead of a war on poverty, we wage war against the poor, end quote. Indeed, the government's war on drugs fails to address the social conditions such as the lack of jobs and affordable housing, which breed drug abuse and the culture of violence associated with it. 1990 saw new homicide records set in 8 in the nation's largest cities, including Washington, D.C. Urban myth. Sweet, guys. All right, so that's part 6 of The War on Drugs is a Lie, guys.